Florida Governor Rick Scott is denying the bombshell allegations we brought you last night that officials in Florida's Department of Environmental Protection were banned from using the words climate change. The report from the Florida Center for Investigative Reporting alleges that DEP officials had been told not to use the words climate change and global warming in official reports and communications, and that the unwritten policy was communicated in 2011 after Rick Scott, an established climate change denier, came into office. Christopher Bird, who worked as an attorney with the DEP's Office of General Counsel from 2008 to 2013, said that he was warned not to use climate change and related terms during a 2011 staff meeting. Quote, "I did infer from this meeting that this was a new policy, that these words were to be prohibited for use from official DEP policy making with our clients." Several other staffers reported similar experiences, and earlier today, Governor Rick Scott responded.
Governor, were you aware that scientists were being told not to speak about climate change, and will scientists in the future be able to speak about climate change in their studies?
Sure. Well, first off, that's untrue. At our Department of Environmental Protection, look, there's lots of conversations about this issue. From my standpoint, like every issue, my goal is, instead of talking about it, let's do something about it. So in the last 4 years, we've put money in beach renourishment with regard to flood mitigation, settled decades-old lawsuit over the Everglades, historic funding to deal with the water quality, the Tame Island Trail, raising that, historic funding for our springs. So my goal is to continue to make progress.
Noticed he didn't actually use the words climate change there either. We asked the governor's office to comment on the report. They told us, quote, "It's not true." Didn't specify what specifically. But former DEP attorney Christopher Bird, the person we showed you before, who's on the record saying it is true, he is standing by what he told the Florida Center for Investigative Reporting, that after Rick Scott was elected governor, officials at the Florida's DEP were explicitly warned not to use the terms climate change or global warming. Joining me now is Christopher Bird, former Senior Assistant General Counsel for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Mr. Bird, can you tell me when and how the policy at question of not saying climate change or global warming was communicated to you?
Yes, shortly after Rick Scott was elected in 2010 and was inaugurated at the beginning of the next year, 2011, the General Counsel's office called a staff meeting with all the lawyers to warn us that things were going to change under the new administration. And within those changes were certain policies that would prohibit us from using these terms: climate change, global warming, sustainability, and even sea level rise.
Wait a second. They told you you could not use the phrase sea level rise in your official capacity for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection?
That is correct. It was a clear direction that this administration was not on board from a partisan position with science regarding climate change.
This was verbally communicated to you by your manager?
By my superiors in the Office of General Counsel, yes.
Did they explicitly say this is coming from the governor?
No, they did not. But this was during a time when the governor's office was laying off a vast number of employees in Florida statewide and targeting specific scientists for firing. So we knew that if it came to us or this policy, we wanted to keep our jobs, we better not use those terms.
So you're being told there's a new boss in town. It's the governor. Obviously, he's been elected, and he has the right under that to set policy. At the same time, there are lots of layoffs of people in your department. And you put those two together, and not only do you understand that you're not supposed to say these words, but if you do, you could be running a risk of losing your job.
Exactly. It was very clear.
Are there other people who had the same experience?
Yeah, unfortunately, as a result of this story, other employees of the department are now able to come out and speak about their experience having their presentations and reports actually censored by the governor's office. Just recently, someone who worked for the Department of Health also had climate change stricken from her reports.
They actually went in and scrubbed it out?
Before it was able to be published, you had to run it by their office.
So what was your reaction to this at the time? I mean, did you feel like you could adequately do your job under these constraints?
Well, at that time, I was counsel for the Coral Reef Conservation Program in Miami. And as you can imagine, we use those terms quite often to describe the threats that are present to the coral reef resources in Florida. climate change, warming oceans, and rising acidic levels in the oceans were great threats to our coral resources, so it made it very difficult for us to continue our public outreach and education, being essentially gagged from using those terms.
You were ultimately fired from your position in that the Department of Environmental Protection. What do you say to people who say that you are essentially disgruntled, this is sour grapes?
Oh, I was fired 2 years ago. I have a very rewarding practice in public interest environmental law here in Florida. I was asked to recount my experiences at DEP under Rick Scott, and I'm happy to share the truth with everybody. I'm glad to see others having the courage to step up and speak out.
What does it mean to you that the state of Florida is currently governed by a man who apparently, I mean, he denies it, but according to what you're saying, doesn't allow these terms to be used and seems to be burying its head in the sand, even though it's perhaps the state of the union most threatened by things like sea level rise and climate change?
It's very concerning personally, but I'm hoping that as a result of this story, the governor's office will indeed step up and do what they say, address these issues head on and make progress. There's no point in denying climate change or banning your scientists from using those words anymore. I hope the governor's office steps up and shows us that he's on board and will support science in the state of Florida.
Christopher Bird, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, it occurs to me one way to definitively rebut this from the governor's office would just to produce a lot of documents that they published that have the terms climate change or sea level rise. They could just do that, and then that would be a pretty convincing rebuttal, we should see.